Hello everyone, Carnasa here, and welcome back to Coming Home. I'm going to start off this episode with a bit of a quick recap of what happened in the last live stream. I have mentioned before that the live streams are going to be separate from these episodes, so if you want to catch out the live stream, I'll leave a card now. Anyway, to sum it all up, what happened is we attempted our first crewed landing of Ash, and it went terribly wrong. Unfortunately, Ziggy Kerman did hit the ground a little bit too quickly, and therefore died. Our first casualty in the series. So yeah, that wasn't very good, and it left poor Boris Kerman in orbit on his own. We can see he is actually making his way back to Rhode now, coming in rather hot with the rest of his spacecraft, which we actually decided to break up a little bit too late, which is why obviously we saw the rest of that breaking up as we came down. But there we go, parachutes have been deployed, and we have touched safely down on the surface of Rhode. So we do have a contract to still plant a flag on the surface of Ash. We didn't manage to do that because, as I mentioned before, well, we hit the ground a tad too hard, and yes, Ziggy unfortunately died. So we are going to be coming into the vehicle assembly building now to work on a new crewed mission to Ash. The last mission that we sent, it was actually done in 2 launches. We launched the lander separately, and then we launched a crew to actually rendezvous with the lander in Ash orbit, and then transfer them across and then land on Ash. This time, however, we are going to attempt to do it all in one launch. So this is going to be by far the biggest vehicle that I've designed in this series yet. That command capsule is the Rodan command capsule, if I recall correctly, and essentially it is SpaceX's Crew Dragon. So we can fit 4 Kerbals in there, and then with the lander as well, we can fit another 3 in this mission if we so desired. I'm not going to be doing that though, because getting 4 crew over to Ash is proving rather problematic with USI anyway. But you can see I have actually designed the lander in a separate craft file, and I have now, well, I saved it as a subassembly and brought it in. Once again, using the Alcor pod, because the Alcor pod is truly amazing. If you don't have it, or if you've never used it, I would highly recommend checking it out, because it has the best IVA out of any pod in the entire game. Or, well, that's just my opinion anyway. But now what we're doing is we are working on a stage that is going to get us over to Ash and to capture at Ash. It won't return us, because the way that I've designed this craft, well, we are going to have to ditch this stage when we want to use the lander. Fortunately, we do have a stage on the actual orbiter, which will get us back to Rhode. We are going to have to ditch that ring though, which might prove a bit interesting when it comes to habitation times in USI. But we have now finished the craft, and it is time to launch it. Ash number 2 on Ascilla 3 with Bobby Kerman, Zach Kerman, Joe Kerman, and Sono Kerman in control of the spacecraft. So this is a bit of a milestone achievement for the space agency, considering this is the first time we have also sent more than 2 Kerbals to space at once. Yeah, we've sent 4, so it's quite a dramatic increase in the amount of crew that we can actually launch into space. So this is very promising for future missions. Well, definitely very promising for colonization when we want to go along that route. And actually, I think we will be potentially colonizing fairly soon. You could see Lua in the background there. That looks very tempting. I really want to set up some kind of base on there very, very, very soon. There are a few parts that I do need to research first. I'm a little bit limited with the technology that I do own at the moment, but you can see we are finally making our way into orbit. And actually, we're going to be starting our burn to head over to Ash. And there we go, the fairings have deployed, and the Ash spacecraft, Ash 2, can now be seen in all of its glory. I mean, you did just see me designing it, so once again, not a particularly big reveal, but I kind of really liked how this turned out. And I think crafts with rings they look very interplanetary, which is a bit bizarre considering we're not going interplanetary at the moment. We are still remaining within the Rhode system, but just to get over to Ash, it does take a long time. You can see this mission has taken 6 days already, and with USI, well, our crew would have been rather upset if we hadn't had that ring on. It really adds a lot to the habitation time of this craft, which is something I am really struggling with. I'm hoping with better technology that might change in the future, but we have managed to now capture ourselves at Ash in a bit of a wonky orbit, so I'm going to quickly correct this now. This is what you get for using MechJeb in stock. It does all kinds of weird things, but it's okay. I can go in and I can make the slight adjustments that I want to do. I wanted to keep my orbit at around 50-ish kilometers. That way it should be rather easy for us to rendezvous with the orbiter with the lander when we return from the surface of Ash. So what we're doing now is we are getting Sono Kerman and Bobby Kerman to do a bit of an EVA to get in the lander. The craft is designed so that they can't go through internally. So this is a little bit like the way the Russians would have done their lunar landings. We had to get them out and transfer them across the good old-fashioned way, I guess you could call it. It was a bit bad, but they are in the lander now, and they are going to be attempting their landing very shortly. You can see we have split off from the main orbiter, and we did have a little bit of an issue with battery power. I'm not sure what happened there because there was more than enough on the orbiter. It was a little bit strange, but there we go. We can see that zooming off in the distance as we start our descent burn so we can land somewhere safe on Ash. We are coming down a little bit close to the lava, and as last episode taught us, we don't really want to be landing too close because it's very hot, but we were fine, and there we go. We have touched down on the surface of Ash. Now what we're going to do is we are going to be grabbing Bobby Kerman, and she is going to be the first Kerbal to step foot on this rather inhospitable moon, this very hot moon. We are going to be grabbing that flag, sticking it down into the ashen surface, and of course, we are going to be leaving a rather touching message for our dearly departed Ziggy Kerman. Rest in peace, Ziggy Kerman. After spending a little bit of time on the surface of Ash running all kinds of important scientific experiments that we wanted Sono Kerman and Bobby Kerman to run, it is of course time to actually begin our ascent to orbit of Ash so we can rendezvous with that Ash orbiter. So this lander had a little bit of a mind of its own when we were sending it back up, and it kind of wobbled all over the place in a rather worrying way, and partly that was due to me forgetting to turn on Smart ASS as soon as I should have done, and also partly because I think the center of mass of this lander was slightly offset and the reaction wheels weren't good enough to actually balance that when we were using our engine. So we are in orbit now, and we did actually manage to get a rendezvous whilst we were doing our orbital insertion burn, which was really nice. I've never been able to time it that perfectly before, I don't think, to actually rendezvous with our target as soon as we made it into orbit. But there we go. We are now only 36 meters away, so we are going to grab Bobby Kerman. We are going to take all of the data from that lander and grab it, and then we are going to transfer it across the orbiter, and then we are going to grab Sono Kerman and just move him across as well. There we go. They are now both safely back in the orbiter, so it is time to break apart that centrifuge ring, and it did get a little bit stuck on the interstage. I'm not entirely sure what happened there, but now with that USI screen coming up, you can see we only had 7 days of habitation left. That is an issue, as it's going to take us 8 days and 4 hours to actually make it back to Rhode. So because of that, that means our Kerbals are going to turn to tourists by the time they get, well, where we are right now. Luckily, MechJeb was, well, it still worked and allowed us to have attitude control, so we were able to stick ourselves retrograde. But what we weren't able to do was detach the stage and let the heat shield take the brunt of the force. So what I decided to do was actually start firing up those engines, see if we could slow ourselves down a little bit. And because of this, we were able to bring back the engines and the fuel tank as well, and a lot of the supplies. So I guess it wasn't the best of re-entries, but we managed to bring back more than we would have done. So one thing I do want to say about this episode, well, I went into the contracts there and I just cheat completed the Ash program because for some reason, the craft that it recognized as us landing Kerbals on Ash and then planting a flag and then having to return those Kerbals was the Ash rover that we landed in the last episode. That wasn't what it should have been. It should have been the mission that we just sent back. So I did have to cheat complete that. I did fulfill the contract requirements though. It just didn't recognize it. But yeah, I was saying one thing about this episode. It may seem a little bit oddly quiet. For some reason, my recording software decided not to record any of the game audio. So it is just going to be my voice and the music in the background. So we did unlock a fair whack of new technology there. And we have pretty much done all of the contracts around Rhode except for one moon. And that moon is going to be Armstrong. So what we're going to do is we have picked up some contracts for Armstrong. We've picked up a new administration thing. What are they called? Administration initiative? I think that might be the best word to describe them. Yeah, we've picked up one of those for Armstrong. So what we're going to do is we are going to build ourselves an Armstrong scanner. We only need to get a flyby at the moment, but actually what I did do is I did pick up a lot of ScanSat contracts for Armstrong as well. So we're going to get our flyby. We are also going to scan the living daylights out of Armstrong as well, because we are going to be wanting to send crew over there, and we want to know the topography. We want to know the layout of the land, where the resources are, where absolutely everything is. And this satellite that we are going to be sending will be able to do everything. Every single scanner that we have currently unlocked in this playthrough is going to be present on there. So that's high and low res altimetry, low res resources, high and low res visual, and biome. So yeah, this thing is a real jack of all trades. It can do absolutely everything. So what we're going to do is we are going to whack this on a Harpy 4, and I am going to slightly modify the Harpy 4 because it could use a better first stage engine. So we have done that, and we've also attached separation motors on those boosters so they don't go flying back into the core of the spacecraft. But there you go. You could see me just picking up all of those ScanSat contracts there. And now it is time to actually launch this vehicle, this craft, this scanner that we are going to be sending over to the smallest moon in the Rhode system. I'm not sure how it directly compares to Minmus in stock, but I imagine Armstrong is a very good comparison to Minmus. It is tiny. You don't really need a lot of Delta V to land whatsoever. It's just a tiny little rock. It's even got gorges and highlands. It's basically a brown and grey version of Minmus. Minmus obviously being minty green. So it's going to be easy to land on. However, it's a bit harder to encounter than, say, Ash, because Ash's sphere of influence is huge. Armstrong's really isn't. But you can see we're quite far out. We're still on we're still on a flyby trajectory. What we're doing here is we are changing our inclination so that we can get it as close to 90 degrees as possible. Obviously, we want to be in a polar inclination, so we go over every single biome, we can cover the entire moon with this scanner. There we go. We are starting our burn now to actually capture in our orbit around Armstrong, because we don't want to be zooming over the surface of Armstrong and then completely missing it. So we have captured. I do want to raise our orbit ever so slightly. That way, the scanners that are on this craft are going to be working at their peak performance. There we go. We have pretty much raised our orbit to where we want it to be now, and we're going to leave that and turn back to the vehicle assembly building, because one of those administrative initiatives, that is what I decided to call those earlier on, it requires us to land a probe in 3 separate biomes of Ash. That is, not Ash, of Armstrong. That is one of the ones that we've picked up. So rather than doing 3 separate launches to Armstrong, what I have decided to do is build a multi-lander launch vehicle. There we go. I have been very inventive with this name. This is the Armstrong Multi-Lander. And what it is going to be, it's very simple. We have a lander, we have landing legs, we've got batteries, we've got a seismic experiment, thermometers, antennas, solar panels, everything that we need for a lander, and then we're just going to copy and paste that a couple of times. So we've got 3 of those because, well, we need to land in 3 separate biomes, and that's exactly what this is going to be able to do. You can see they really don't have an awful lot of delta V, each one of those landers, only about 200 meters per second. However, as I did mention earlier on in the video, Armstrong is incredibly easy to land on. So I don't think, because I hadn't landed on it by this point, I thought 200 meters per second would be more than enough to actually land on the surface. There we go. I have once again updated the Harpy 4. It now has some RCS on that upper core stage because it was getting difficult to move that around with only the reaction wheels of the spacecraft. And I thought, well, it'd be easier if we had some RCS so we could actually move that around properly. And that has helped a lot. What I am going to do as well, you can see me doing it here, I am going to build a modular launch pad as well, just to make it look a bit nicer. But with that being done, it is time to launch the Armstrong multi-lander, which obviously we just saw being built, but we have made it into orbit of Rhode yet again, and it is time to plot out our maneuver node over to Armstrong, start up that core stage yet again. This is almost a single stage to orbit the Harpy 4. In fact, I'm fairly certain with a very light payload that the core stage could get us into orbit with just a single stage. That's how easy it is to orbit Rhode. Rhode is obviously very easy to orbit due to the fact that it has a very, very low atmosphere, being 50 kilometers up, and you really don't need a lot of delta V to actually get to orbit. But we have managed to make our way over to Armstrong now. We are going to capture around the moon, and then it is time to pick 3 suitable landing spots. And obviously, the easiest one to land will probably be the Gorges, so I definitely want to land in one of those. And I want to land on, well, there's 4 biomes in Armstrong as far as I'm aware, and that is gentle slopes, steep slopes, highlands, and the Gorges. And out of those 4, well, the 3 that I want to land on, the one that I really don't want to land on are the steep slopes. But we can see we have now come down, and this biome does count as gentle slopes. So that was the first of the landers. Now we are going to be attempting to land on the highlands because I thought this was a really easy biome to pick out. I do have the ScanSat. I should have checked that before trying these landings. I didn't. I don't know why I didn't. That would have been smart, but there we go. We have now landed in the highlands as well. So that's the second one. And the third one, I am going to attempt to land in the Gorges. So we are going to change our inclination and go for that rather lighter grey section because I was fairly convinced that that was going to count as a gorge. There we go. We can see we are coming down now. There goes our stage blowing up into the surface of Armstrong. Hopefully we got some good seismic data with that. And we have touched down with the final lander. So with that being done, it is now time to pay attention to sending crew over to Armstrong. We've done our unmanned series of missions to that moon. So what we're going to do is we are going to come into the vehicle assembly building and design us a crewed mission to Armstrong. And I decided, you may be able to see that we're not building a generic capsule lander to go there. No, we are going to attempt to land on Armstrong with a space plane. I thought it would be a little bit more interesting rather than just designing some kind of new capsule. Having a space plane is a little bit cooler, and it's a lot easier to build space planes like this in stock-ish KSP rather than RO, which is what I usually do. And I feel like we can definitely get the delta V required and the kind of thrust required that we are going to need to actually land one of these on Armstrong. Like I've said already quite a few times in this episode, it is quite easy to land on Armstrong. You really don't need a lot of delta V. You can see we do have actually almost 4,000 delta V in this stage, which is going to be more than enough to do any kind of orbital maneuvers that we are going to want to do to actually get us over to Armstrong and land. So I do have Ferrum Aerospace Research installed. I am bringing that up to check how we are going to kind of cope when we re-enter Rhode. And I do have mostly green numbers, and you always kind of want green numbers. Green numbers are good. There were a few red numbers, but they were only slightly off. So I am hoping that because they are only slightly off, well, the fact that we're going to have quite powerful RCS on this should mean that we don't go spinning out of control. The red numbers are only when we are quite high up in the atmosphere as well. When we get lowered down, it is all green, which is very promising. So that RCS should be enough to control us. So that's what I'm hoping anyway. That's what I was going into this build thinking. So we do need a way to actually get this to orbit. This could technically get to... No, it couldn't. It couldn't get to orbit on its own because it's not got high enough thrust to weight ratio. But it's got the delta V to get to orbit. But yeah, no, we are going to need to build a launch vehicle for this. I did just... Well, I tried to go for one that I have already used, but none of them really fit the purpose, so I did do a quick design. It's really quickly thrown together to basically just get us to a low road orbit. And actually, there isn't enough delta V in this to get us to orbit. We are going to have to use a little bit of the actual space plane to finalize that orbit, but that doesn't matter. It means that the spent stages are going to go crashing back into the surface of road, and we will be cleaning up after ourselves. But here we go. We have Dart 1 on the Dart launch vehicle. Boris Kerman and Zach Kerman are going to be the brave Kerbonauts for this flight. And we got a lovely little shot of the IVA of this cockpit with all of those cool screens. I love cockpits that have cool screens in them. It just makes like pressing buttons. I'm a real child. I can press buttons and it can be really exciting and I can get all kinds of useful information up at the same time. But you can see we are now using the actual space plane, the orbiter stage, to finalize our orbits around road. Like I was saying whilst we were building this thing, we do need to do this. So yeah, it is good because those spent stages are going to go crashing back into the surface. We have made our orbit and it is now time to plot over our route to Armstrong, which doesn't take a particularly large amount of delta V to actually get to. There you go. We can see we are very slowly getting over to Armstrong. This stage burnt for a really long time, but we are leaving road behind. We are on our way to Armstrong. We're going to say goodbye to road for not very long. It doesn't take anywhere near as long to get to Armstrong as it does to Ash. Armstrong is obviously a lot closer, and that actually made it rather easy to design this space plane in regards to USI. So the habitation on this space plane was about 22 days, which is a lot more than any of the other capsules that I have been using do give us. And I think it might be something to do with the fact that these capsules are a little bit more advanced, they're a little bit more futuristic, and it just means that Kerbals have a lot nicer time when they are inside one of these capsules. But we can see we have indeed captured around Armstrong, and we are now beginning our final descent burn. And unfortunately, we are going to be landing somewhere that we can't see road from. There we go, we are finally coming down. Not that it matters that we can see road. As far as I remember, Armstrong isn't actually tidally locked to road, so it doesn't really matter. We will essentially see road eventually, but we have got Boris Kerman out. He is going to plant a flag. This is going to be Armstrong Site 1, and of course we are rather excited that we have built a space plane. But now it is time to lift off from the surface of Armstrong in a bit of a weird maneuver that we are pulling here. I basically wanted to point straight up using the RCS on the Dart. That is what this space plane is called after all. And then we are going to start burning prograde until we manage to get an orbit of Armstrong. So we still do have a lot of delta V left in this craft. And what I do want to do is I want to get this craft to a low road orbit rather than coming into the atmosphere as soon as we encounter roads. So you can see I'm bringing my periaps down to about 60 kilometers now. And then once we get to that 60 kilometers point, what we are going to do is we are going to try and circularize our orbit around road. That way, when we do come back down in the atmosphere, well, we're not going to be going faster than we'd like. We are going to slow down to a road orbital speed rather than coming in at a Armstrong return speed, which is obviously going to be a lot faster, will put a lot more strain on this space plane, and would likely end up, well, things going a little bit worse than if we slow ourselves down like we are now. There we go, we have circularized our orbit, and it is time to begin our final descent into the atmosphere of road with the Rhode Planetary Space Alliance first attempt at using a space plane. So we can see we are now below 50 kilometers. That means we are in fact beginning our re-entry. And I decided to go for about 40 degrees with the nose pitching up. I thought that might be kind of a good mark to pitch this up so that we could bleed off as much speed as we could. There we go. We can see we are starting to feel the effects of re-entry now. We can see those rather hot flames licking, well, hot plasma licking the side of the spacecraft. This point, I tried to land at the island runway, which is that little green spot that you can see down on the right that has now vanished. Unfortunately, because I tried to turn the craft when I really shouldn't have done, we completely lost control of the space plane, and it started to spiral out of control and ended up slamming face first into a mountain.